able to read a book in a car? If so, you're really lucky to be able to do it because 1/3 of the whole population have motion sickness and they can't. I have a really bad case of motion sickness, and which is why today I'm going to give you a presentation about motion sickness. The table of content is first the definition of motion sickness, next is the causes, and next the symptoms, the history of how long people have been suffering, next is the solutions and preventions, and lastly, quiz. First, the definition of motion. The definition is a condition that occurs when the brain receives conflicting signals about motion and balance in inner ear, eyes, and bodies. This is the causes for motion sickness, which I'm going to explain a bit later. The medical definition, the medical word for motion sickness is kinetosis, and it's a physiological response to perceived motion characterized by autonomic symptoms, resulting in sensory conflict in visual, vestibular, and proprioceptive inputs. Vestibular means 전동에 and proprioceptive means 고유감각. The causes are, it's caused by a sensory conflict between the inner ear, eyes, and deeper body senses, which sense all different things. And when these inputs don't match, the brain can confuse and it can trigger the symptoms. Inside our ears, there is a vestibular system which has 3 semicircular tubes and a hairline sac, and they're also fluids. And when we move, the fluid shifts, and our ears can sense where if we're going horizontally or vertically, and even which angle we're going. But for example, you're in a car, then your ears will sense a movement inside a car, but your eyes will be showing like an image from inside the car which isn't moving. So when these don't match, the brain gets confused. And also the opposite situation might be occurred when you're sitting down but you're watching some kind of video which is moving, which also cause cause the brain to get confused. The common triggers the example of the causes might be reading or screen in motions in a car, or like virtual reality or video games, or it can be also internal or psychological problems such as anticipation or anxiety, or strong odors which causes mild motion sickness, and it can be poor ventilation, and also it can be heavy meals, dehydration, and much more. Next is the symptoms of motion sickness. There are a lot of symptoms like nausea, fatigue, dizziness, headaches, vomiting, drowsiness, and light headaches. But the most common symptoms probably are nausea, dizziness, headache, and vomiting. Next is the history of motion sickness. First, Galen and Hippocrates was the first person to describe and give a description about motion sickness. And nausea comes from naus, which is Greek for ship. Next is the Middle Ages to Renaissance. Sea voyages were very common, but they had little information about motion sickness, so their remedies were herbal concoctions or wine. In the 18th to 19th centuries, a Scottish physician called James Lind researched about motion sickness, and he said he discovered motion sickness was caused because of a disturbance in the nervous system. And seasickness and motion sickness were recognized because there were a lot of ships and sea voyages. The early 20th century, the term motion sickness were well recognized, and because there were a lot of automobiles, there also were like car sickness, and because there was war in the early 20th century, it was also air sickness was also a really big problem during the war. And then the mid to late 20th centuries, there were a lot of spaceships and space missions in NASA, and also the astronauts were getting motion sickness, and because of that, NASA started researching about motion sickness more, and there were advances. And lastly, the 21st century, people started researching genetic studies or VR or AR. Lastly, the solutions and preventions of motion sickness. There are a lot of, these are the preventions, and these are the solutions. There are a lot of preventions. Before riding the car, you can improve the ventilation or avoid heavy meals or stay hydrated. And choose your seat wisely, which means that don't seat on the back seat if you feel a lot of motion sickness, or like seat in the front seat. And where you're riding on a plane, you should probably choose your seat next to the wings. And solutions of motion sickness is like getting ginger or breathing techniques, or lie down if possible. Next is Chris. Do you have any questions?
Ginger.
Ginger.
Does it help?
Yeah, it said the research said ginger helps like motion sickness. Let me move on to what are some common cases of motion sickness? Common causes.
Headache.
That's a symptom.
아.
Causes.
2번.
Inner ear imbalance.
Some common causes might be like riding on a car, or like playing video games, which would cause the brain to be confused because of a mismatch. Next, what are the symptoms of motion sickness?
Headache. nausea. Dizziness.
How can we prevent motion sickness?
Go right.
Now you have like ginger left on your brain.
The common causes of motion sickness might be poor ventilation, or a sudden change in speed or altitude.
Ventilation right now.
Next, the symptoms of motion sickness might be dizziness, headaches, or fatigue. And lastly, to prevent motion sickness, it might be stay hydrated, or avoid heavy movement. Thank you.